Hello, today we're going to talk about the geometry of solids. So what I've given you is a sheet of paper for you to write your notes down. And what we're going to do is go through all the terms and you can write it down at your own pace. You can stop it, you can pause it, you can do whatever you want to do. This is for you. So you can always rewatch it if you need to. So today we're going to talk a lot about three-dimensional figures. When we talk about three-dimensional figures, we're talking about figures that are made up of polygons. Anytime you have polygons that make up a three-dimensional figure, it's called a polyhedron. The flat surfaces of a polyhedron are what we call the faces. Sometimes we have faces on top, bottom, and on the sides. Now, we can identify things based upon the type of faces we have. So here at the bottom, you see 4 different types of polyhedrons. 2 of which that you're so used to, a cube and a pyramid. Now, each of those has special features to it. Now, a face of a polyhedron is just like the front, back, top, bottom, left, and right of a cube. Or in this case, in a pyramid, you have the bottom, which is the base, and the lateral sides. Now, anytime you have 2 faces that touch each other, whether it's top, bottom, or left and right, it creates an edge. Those are the lines of the polyhedron. Every time that an edge is connecting with other edges, we call that a vertex. Now, polyhedrons can be made up of many different shapes. Here we have a 4-sided polyhedron, a cube. We have a pyramid. We have, it looks like a pentagonal prism. And then we also have a hexagonal prism. Now, when we talk about sides, it's classified by the number of faces. So if it has more faces, it determines what type of name it has. Now, what we're used to with 4 faces is what we call a tetrahedron. Tetra meaning 4. Hedron is the term for a three-dimensional figure. A hexahedron has 6 faces. A heptahedron has 7. Decahedron has 10. Now, when we have polyhedrons that have regular polygons, say they were all squares, or they were all regular pentagons or hexagons, those would be called regular polyhedrons. In this case, you'll notice that this polyhedron is made up of pentagons. In this case, 12 pentagons. So we call that a regular dodecahedron. We don't use the pentagon as part of it. We just talk about how many there are. Now, when we talk about prisms, prisms are special types. We've used prisms before. They have 2 bases, top and bottom. They're usually congruent and parallel to each other from top to bottom. The lateral faces are what goes around. Those are the actual faces of the polyhedron. So we have here a rectangular prism, which has a rectangle on top, rectangle on bottom, and rectangles going around. We have a triangular prism, triangle on top and bottom, rectangles around. This hexagonal prism that you see on the right has 2 hexagons on top and bottom, but since it's kind of slanted, those are more like parallelograms rather than rectangles. Now, all those lateral faces, when they meet together, all those dotted lines that you see, and there's a couple of solid lines, those are what we call the lateral edges. We use for lateral edges 2 letters. For all the bases, we'll use how many letters there are for those. So just make sure to keep that in mind. Now, a prism where it's rectangles and it goes straight up and down, it's called a right prism. That can mean for a pentagonal prism. Notice how it goes straight up and down. A prism that goes or is slanted a little bit, kind of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, is an oblique prism. You see at the bottom right, there's an oblique triangular prism. The altitude of a prism is the same as, the height. Height is straight up and down. Altitude is straight up and down. So when we look at the right pentagonal prism, it's pretty easy to find the height. When it's an oblique prism, we got to make sure we're looking straight up and down and not the slant height. That will be very key when we're doing volume. A pyramid is another polyhedron. We've dealt with them before. Here we have 4 different types of pyramids. a triangular pyramid, a trapezoidal pyramid, a hexagonal pyramid, and a square-based pyramid. Now you'll notice on this trapezoidal pyramid at the top, it talks about the vertex. Whenever we have a pyramid, wherever they meet at the top, at that one point, that's called the vertex of the pyramid. There'll be a couple questions asking you about vertex, so that way you can figure that out. Altitude, again, is straight up and down. Most of the time, it will be the height of the pyramid. Cylinders are just like prisms, except in this case, we're made up of circles. So a cylinder has two bases, top and bottom, circles, has an area that goes around. We have the radius, that's from the center to the edge of the circle. We have an axis that goes straight up and down. In this case, in the right cylinder, kind of the way that you spin it. Now, you can also have an oblique cylinder, so you got to make sure that when we're looking for height, just like the other prisms, it's straight up and down. A cone is another type of solid. Circle on the bottom, almost like a pyramid going up. You have a vertex at the top. You have an altitude straight up and down. And again, you have a radius. On the left, you have what we call a right cone. Most of the time, we just call that a basic cone. On the right-hand side, you have an oblique cone. It's kind of slanted. We won't be dealing a lot with oblique cones, but occasionally you will have them. A sphere is kind of like a baseball, basketball, golf ball, volleyball, basically like our Earth. Okay, so it's a big ball. You have a radius, just like you have with cylinders and cones. You have a center, just the same way. In this case, there's no like straight edges. It's all curved. Now, a hemisphere is half of a sphere. So we live in the northern hemisphere. We're north of the equator. Southern hemisphere would be south of the equator. The equator, we call it for the Earth, but in a sphere, it's called the Great Circle. So anytime you have any type of hemisphere, that great circle that's at the bottom of the hemisphere, that's what it's called. Now in this example, you're going to name all of the lateral faces, lateral edges, vertex, and base of the square pyramid. So for lateral faces, those are the triangles. Those take 3 letters apiece. So that's DAE, AEB, BEC, and CED. The lateral edges use 2 letters. So DE, AE, BE, and CE. The vertex is at the top of the pyramid, that's E. And for the base of the pyramid, that's the 4 letters that make up the square, A, B, C, D. Make sure you follow the directions on all of your homework, and hopefully this will help you out in doing it.